My name is Jay and welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing our Arctic park, which I have named Ålesund Artic Wildlife Park. Now I've named it that because Ålesund is, I believe, a township in Norway, and I heard about it because there's this place called Ny Ålesund, which is a research centre based in a place called basically New Ålesund. And I kind of heard about it in a podcast, just thought it was a cool name, very fitting of the whole Arctic theme that we've got going on. So that's what I've named it. And today we're going to be working on our Dall sheep habitat. Now, the Dall sheep, or the Dall sheep, or the thin-horned sheep, is a species of wild sheep native to North America. We're talking about Alaska, that sort of area. I believe the Yukon Territory is the main kind of area, the Northwest Territories, and a bit of British Columbia as well. They kind of live on these dry, open, kind of alpine areas, so up in like mountain meadows and steep slopes, very rugged terrain. And this is pretty useful for them. There are not many predators that can navigate this sort of terrain in the area, and it does have all the plants they need for their regular consumption. And they've become my surprise favourite out of the four animals. I thought I was going to love the polar bear the most, and I do really like the polar bear, but this sheep, I think it's quite unique compared to anything else we have in the game, and it's just quite cool. I love the design. They've got this little adorable little black tear mark under the eyes. Their horns are beautifully detailed. You'll have a look later in the cinematics when I get some close-up views. The horns especially, I think, are done really well. And yeah, so I decided to build a very mountainous habitat for them. So the whole habitat is sunken in, and there's a mountain or hill that kind of has different tiers to it that pops up from the middle of the habitat. And it gets up to just about eye level for the visitors that are going to be walking around the habitat itself. Now, if you recall, in the last episode I mentioned that I used a lot of rock work in the polar bear habitat. Well, that was nothing compared to this one. I've used a ridiculous amount of rocks. If you actually count them, I selected everything just to have a look. I think it's close to 3,000 individual rock pieces, which is bonkers. It just took me a good while to do it, but I think having done that, I've achieved a really nice effect. I blended the tundra rocks with the tiger rocks. Thanks to this person who pointed out that I was pronouncing tiger wrongly in the previous episode. Thank you to them. So yeah, it's tiger, I believe. And yeah, we have the tiger rocks and the tundra rocks blended together because we are in the tiger habitat, but I'm using primarily tundra items. So blending them together, I think, works really, really well. And as for the habitat itself, again, like I said, very rocky, but I do introduce a lot more foliage here than I have in the polar bear habitat. For that one, I tried to keep it pretty bare. I can't imagine polar bears would like much foliage. I believe in zoos where they are kept, they tend to just avoid putting in any foliage, but if they do, they don't seem to mind. Now, polar bears, again, in captivity, not the best, but animals like the Dall sheep do seem to do pretty fine in captivity, as far as I can tell. As far as I can tell, there's not many Dall sheep in captivity, but from what I've seen, they don't seem to do particularly badly. They seem to be doing pretty okay. So that's a good thing, and I'm always happy to work with an animal that I know does well in these sort of situations. Now, one thing I was really worried about actually was because I'm doing so much rock work in this habitat, and as we go on, you're going to notice that there are rocks on pretty much every surface, and I was trying to get them to guide the sheep upwards in a sort of spiraling fashion, where there's lots of access points into the different tiers of the hill. And there's actually a cave in the middle of the hill where they can go into rest. It's a kind of a naturalistic shelter. But I was worried that because I'm using so many rocks that the game wouldn't really recognize a lot of this area as traversable for the animals. But I was really pleasantly surprised. It seems like the sheep can actually walk across pretty much all the terrain in the habitat, which I was really, really happy about because they really give a cool effect when you see them walking all throughout the habitat, up the mountain, along these little canyons basically that I've made. It was just quite a cool look, I think. And you'll see in the cinematics, I put in about 21 sheep, so 20 females and 1 male. I believe they can go up much higher, but I just decided to put in the 20 for now and we'll see how it goes. but it doesn't look too crowded at all because they're not very big animals and they do live in herds, so I thought that was an okay number to have. The male, I think, we can only have one male. They live in these very much alpha male type situations where you have the one male and a harem of females. I believe that's true for a lot of the animals in the game. There's some which are the opposite. For example, the timber wolves and the Arctic wolves, you can have one alpha male and one alpha female, that sort of thing. I believe with the elephants, again, you wouldn't want to do that. You'd have one male and a lot of females, or just females. Which I like the amount of care they've put into that, because a lot of these animals do have very different requirements from each other, and you can tell the team has done loads and loads of research into exactly what works for each different species. So again, one of the things that I'm always really happy about. Now for this habitat, one thing I was planning on doing was introducing some viewing platforms. I've done that a few places along the sides of this habitat where the path just kind of sticks out a little bit, and there's this elevated area where you can get a bit of a closer look. I think they turned out okay. I ended up doing some custom fencing as well for the perimeter, just so no one, falls in and gets devoured by all these sheep, which I'm sure wouldn't happen, but you never know. There's some animals out there you'd be really surprised what they eat. Like rhinos in the African plains have been observed eating birds, like just completely just eating them, just like you'd think they were just chill herbivores, but apparently not. So yeah, you'd be surprised sometimes. I also included a more man-made shelter near the bottom. So I have two different shelters basically in this habitat. I have the cave shelter halfway up the hill, which they do use, and the man-made shelter which is towards the left of the habitat, the side facing the polar bears, where it's kind of sunken into the hill a bit, and it's made out of the same material as the viewing shelter we had for the polar bears. So all stuff from the Arctic pack. Again, that's kind of going to be a major theme for this park, because we're only going to have about 4 animals for sure, which are the ones from the Arctic pack. And then perhaps I might include some of the other cold weather animals, maybe the timber wolves, maybe another bear, but probably not, because I did want to keep this series quite short, because I do have my main series to be working on right now, and I need to start planning for my next big project, which is going to be a big zoo in the tropical biome, so that's going to be a lot of fun. I feel like I was supposed to be saying something, wasn't I? Completely forgot what I was supposed to be saying. Something to do with shelters? Yeah? Well, yeah, I was going to use things primarily from the Arctic pack anyways, and I've sunken the shelter down here. And if you see in the cinematics, something really funny that I didn't expect was the sheep actually climbed on top of the shelter. So you'll see one or two just walking on the roof, like it's no big deal. So that was quite cute. I do love how much these sheep climb. I wasn't expecting it. But they get on every surface. It's actually really quite cool. They're just not limited to just the ground, which I love, because it just gives it such a cool vibe. Like this habitat was purpose built for an animal that was going to use every surface. So I'm really happy with that, because I really wasn't expecting it. I thought they would just end up using the ground and not actually climb up my hill. So I did put some enrichment items at the top to kind of tempt them to go as high as possible. So it does seem like they do use it. You can see in the cinematics a couple of them do go all the way up to use the different items. One thing I didn't expect, besides the sheep, but even less so, was that the zookeepers can actually get to the top of the hill. Really wasn't expecting that, but one of them actually went all the way to the top, to the peak, and filled up the feeder enrichment that was up there. Really wasn't expecting that, but very cool, very, very cool. Really quite happy with how they've navigated the terrain. I just wasn't expecting it, and pretty cool. There's also a small water area within the habitat. Now, obviously, I'm not expecting these sheep to be particularly good swimmers, but they do use the water just to drink. You'll see that again in the cinematics. There's a lot of different shots, different behaviours that I managed to catch. One thing I thought was quite cool as well, which I didn't notice, is that one of the females actually ended up pairing up with the male. And instead of just, there's that one-time mating animation, but no, it seems like the female just follows the male around, like, for a good long while. And again, I got some footage of that you'll see later, and I thought that was quite interesting. Like, the fact that is an animation for the animals which have formed bonds like that to just follow each other around. Thought that was quite cool. And yeah, that's most of what I have to say for this particular build. I'm really, really happy with it. I think it turned out great. When it comes to the foliage as well, actually I forgot to mention, is that I used primarily, again, taiga and tundra foliage. Used a lot of these Douglas firs, and I used one monkey puzzle tree. Monkey puzzle trees are actually like my favourite trees ever because they're so prehistoric looking. They've actually been around since like the Cretaceous, I believe. That's why you see them in so many dinosaur documentaries. But they're just a cool tree, and I included one here. Again, a lot of pines, a lot of that sort of tree, a few Scots pines. And a lot of bushes, a lot of low-lying, kind of dry-looking bushes, so the, what's it called? The diamond leaf willow, I believe it's called, and white sagebrush, so both of those look really cool. Alongside, I use some Labrador tea as well. They look quite nice, they just fit in with the little flowers. But I did try to keep it relatively sparse, like I'm not going to over foliage this place like I would with a tropical habitat. And I think it turns out nice, like the foliage just accents the little pieces of rock, makes it look not so repetitive, kind of fills in a lot of the gaps. Oh, I also use lots of crowberry, I believe it's called. Crowberry or cowberry, it's one of those two, or both, I don't even know. Anyways, they're a really nice kind of low-lying type of bush that if you use it correctly can look very much like moss, so that's kind of what I used it for. And I think the effect turns out really well. And yeah, that again, now I'm finally probably done talking about this habitat, and let's talk about what's next. So I've got probably, like I said, because we got 2 more animals that we're going to do for sure, so we might just do the 2 more animals here. And we also got to go back to Boomy Reptile Sanctuary and continue that. What the plans I have for that is, I believe I might be doing a pygmy hippo habitat. I'm not 100% sure yet. I think I might do that with an underwater viewing area, because again, recently I went to Singapore Zoo, I saw their pygmy hippo habitat and I loved it. The hippos look really happy in it, so I want to try and emulate something similar, but on a bit of a grander scale, because I like the fact that in this game we don't really have a limitation on space, so we can just go all out with habitat sizes. So I'm going to do that, try and make it a bit bigger. I'm going to try and keep my habitat sizes relatively large, because I do like that idea that we can kind of go ahead and make idealized habitat sizes, as opposed to what we do see in the real world, which is maybe a bit too small for a lot of animals. But again, there's this whole debate about habitat sizes when it comes to different animals, because, for example, with a lot of reptiles, they actually prefer smaller habitats, which is really interesting because it's quite counter to what we would usually expect of an animal. Most people think, yeah, bigger spaces are generally better, but for example, if you put a big snake in a massive open area, it's going to be incredibly stressed out because it has nowhere to hide, no shelter, a lot of pet snakes especially, they do, for example, if you have a ball python and you give it a massive enclosure with nowhere to hide, it's going to get massively stressed out. However, you get a smaller enclosure, or still a big enclosure but with lots of different smaller areas that it can go and hide in, that's way better. And on the flip side, if you have animals like the polar bear we were talking about, or African elephants, or massive ranging species that travel huge distances, or even big cats really, they're just not going to do super well in smaller habitats. Some animals, if they maybe are born into captivity, they can acclimatize to it a bit better, but overall megafauna are just not super suited to these things. There's always exceptions, like I mentioned in previous video, giraffes are a great example, they do great in captivity. But again, there might be another correlation between the level of intelligence an animal has and its ability to do well in captivity. I don't know if that's an official thing, but if you notice predators, great apes, animals which have a higher level of emotional and intellectual complexity, they're a bit more difficult to keep in captivity. You can do things like provide enrichment, stimulation, things to kind of help them out, but I haven't seen a zoo which does it as good as it could be, because I don't know if you can get it as good as it could be. It might simply not be a possible thing. I will elaborate a lot more on my thoughts on this whole situation in my video about Singapore Zoo, which I keep saying I'm going to release soon, but it's just being a bit of a pain to edit because there's a lot of footage in there and I'm not the best videographer. A lot of my videos from Singapore Zoo are requiring stabilization, etc., because I'm just not that good at film. film producer. I'm just not used to filming in general, so it'll take me a bit longer, I think. But hopefully when it's out, it'll be really useful. It'll just be me discussing habitat design and animal welfare, and how it can be done right, how this place in particular has done a lot of it right, but there are still lingering issues here and there. So that'll be pretty cool, I think. Hopefully you'll all enjoy it, and I'll also post it on the Planet Zoo subreddit, because that's kind of where I post all my builds and stuff whenever I finish them. So if you're interested in seeing any screenshots or anything, I will usually post them on the Planet Zoo subreddit, which I will try to remember the link, but if not, it's just go on Reddit and look for Planet Zoo. Anyways, besides that, back to Boomy Reptile Sanctuary. That series is going to be my main one, but I think I've only got maybe about 7 or 8 episodes left in it. We're about maybe 60% done with the series, so that's not going to be an awful lot longer. And then we're going to build our next big project. So that project, I think, will come about sometime in the new year, probably mid-January or something. And that's about time when I'm going to be starting a full-time job. So uploads might not be as frequent. I'm going to try and keep them quite frequent because I don't have any other commitments outside work, but it is a full-time job, so I'll have to try and find time to kind of get videos out, get videos made, but I'm sure it'll be okay. And I'm not exactly at 1 million subscribers or anything like that, so I'm sure that a slight change in schedule isn't going to bother anyone. But again, thank you so much. We are at 33 subscribers now, so thank you to all 33 of you for subscribing and giving me a watch. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate everyone who does watch these videos. Just love the fact that people actually enjoy this sort of stuff. It's really nice. And yeah, so that's about it for this episode. I will leave you with the cinematics and some music. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!